This is Mission Control Houston, specifically the Artemis Flight Control Room here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This is a live view from a camera mounted on one of Orion's solar array wings. Interestingly enough, each of these solar arrays provides enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom homes. This camera looking back on the European service module as Victor Glover, pilot of the Artemis II mission, conducts his exercise for today. That's why you are seeing some movement on your screen. We are mission elapsed time 5 days, 22 hours, and 2 minutes into the flight of Artemis II, the first flight of humans aboard the Orion spacecraft. And if you are looking for the press conference that was slated to start at 3:30 p.m. Central, we are now expecting that to start closer to 3:45. You're in the right place. You're watching live coverage of the Artemis II mission, the first flight of humans aboard Orion. This is a view coming from outside the Orion spacecraft on one of the solar array wings, pointed back at the spacecraft. And as we mentioned, you see some movement because NASA astronaut Victor Glover is in his exercise period for the day. The crew is having a little bit of a quieter day after a very busy schedule yesterday, photographing and recording observations about the lunar surface as the spacecraft approached just about 4,067 miles away. Our distance to Earth continues to shrink now as we are preparing for splashdown on April 10th. Standing by for the start of our daily press conference here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and expect that to begin momentarily. So if you are watching this channel and looking for more spacecraft views, you can switch to our other live stream. Otherwise, you can stay.
The Artemis II mission is a test mission of the Orion space capsule.
Artemis II will be the first time we put humans on this rocket.
We're going back to the moon because it's the next step in our journey to Mars.
We were always going to the moon.
Pushing ourselves to explore is just core to who we are. That's a part of being a human.
And liftoff. We shall return.
Continuing to test out every bit of Orion.
Coming back to Earth, 7 miles a second.
When humanity sets big goals, we can bring together genius from around the world.
You have the best people on planet Earth putting this vehicle together. That's what's up.
To innovate for the benefit of humanity and to inspire the world through discovery.
And here we go.
Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm Bethany Stevens and we are here today to provide a status update on the historic first crewed test flight of the Orion spacecraft post-lunar flyby. On our panel today, we have NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, Dr. Lori Glaze, head of Artemis, Rick Hinfling, Artemis II Flight Director, Kelsey Young, Artemis II Lunar Science Lead. We'll start with opening remarks from each of the briefers before opening it for questions in the room and on the phone bridge. If you're on the phone, press *1 to submit your question. When called upon, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question. With that, I will hand the floor to Administrator Isaacman for his remarks.
Thanks, Bethany. It's been an exciting Artemis II mission so far, and a very eventful 24 hours as the crew surpassed the Apollo 13 distance record, 252,756 miles from Earth. They relayed observations from the lunar surface. They've captured some incredible imagery. They performed a ship-to-ship call with their colleagues on the International Space Station. They performed additional manual piloting of the Orion spacecraft. They've been working at a reduced cabin pressure of 10.5 psi in support of future integrated lander operations, and they did take a call from the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. We had millions of viewers on that tuned in for that historic broadcast, and it concluded with the President promptly inviting the astronauts to visit the Oval Office. Now, Integrity left the lunar sphere of influence earlier this morning, so they're now approximately 229,000 miles from Earth, and they will splash down Friday evening at approximately 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time, and the recovery weather is so far looking favorable. Now, you can see some of the spectacular images the crew have captured here on our screens. There we go. Now, this is the first time humans have documented some parts of the far side of the moon. Now, these images will be publicly available on NASA's website, our digital platforms, and the White House actually released the now iconic EarthSat photo from earlier today. Now, these are the first of many incredible images of the moon, and we'll continue to release them as they become available. My understanding from just a few minutes ago is that they captured over 175 gigabytes of imagery from the lunar pass alone just yesterday, and the images that you are seeing right now have been transmitted back to Earth predominantly through optical communication, which is pretty cool stuff. Now, before I turn the call over to Dr. Lori Glaze, I wanted to share some of the other things that we are doing at NASA while the Artemis II crew are underway on this historic mission. So the crew on the International Space Station are hard at work. They're undertaking the science and tech demos, many of which have directly supported the Artemis program missions and will continue to do so. The Exploration Ground System personnel, if you want a quick Kennedy Space Center update here, have been out at the launch pad. The crawler, my understanding, is approaching the outer gate, and we expect ML1 to be back in the vehicle assembly building within approximately a week. Now, this would cut down on the turnaround time that we observed from Artemis I, measured in months right now, several months. On the science front, my understanding is the Blue Origin Mark I lunar lander is wrapping up here at the Johnson Space Center in Chamber A. Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope testing is progressing, so much so that we feel reasonably confident we're going to announce a target launch date this year sometime in the next 2 weeks. In aeronautics, we've been flying the X-59 almost daily while the Artemis II mission has been underway. So we work to rebuild our X-plane portfolio. The first senior level Artemis III mission design discussion today. Teams are working with vendors on moon-based RFIs and RFPs, and we are advancing the Skyfall scientific payload for the first interplanetary nuclear-powered spacecraft, SR-1 Freedom. I think the most important point we're trying to make here is we can launch history-making missions like Artemis II, start making meaningful progress towards Artemis III, and do all the other important programs the world's been waiting for from NASA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Glaze.
Thank you, Jared. I just have to say, wow, when I look at all of those images that we're scrolling by. I hope all of you are as inspired as I am. I know as they continue to be downloaded, they're just absolutely stunning, and we really hope that they are inspiring truly everyone in the world. As the crew surpassed their record for the farthest distance, as Jared just mentioned, when they traveled on the far side of the moon, they offered some compelling words, and I love this. They said they challenged this generation and the next to make sure that this record is not long-lived, and I love that because we have big plans to go not just back to the moon on a regular basis, but beyond. And then, of course, while it's been really exciting here the last couple of days, as we've been watching all of the activity in Orion, we still have to ensure that Reid, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy return home safely on Friday evening. So we're pretty focused on that now, making sure that they get home safely. I will just say a couple of things about yesterday's operations. Really provided a great opportunity to test how our flight operations teams and our science teams are working together in real time with the crews at the moon. And in fact, from my perspective, one of my favorite things about watching all of the amazing data that was flowing down yesterday is thinking about how so much of NASA is working together in order to enable all of what you're seeing.
Victor, this is your 2-minute warning. Please stop exercise within 2 minutes for the off-nav maneuver.
All right, better stop exercising. But as I was saying, what's really great to see everybody working together. So I think about our exploration programs that are supporting our transportation systems like Orion, working with our flight operations and our flight directors, all of the ground teams that are supporting, including the science team supported by the Science Mission Directorate, thinking about our crew that are actually performing the work, and then the payloads that have been provided that they're using. So everything that you're looking at isn't just, it's not just the pretty pictures, it's a huge chunk of NASA working together to enable that. All of this information that we're gathering is really going to help refine how we plan our future missions to the lunar surface. I'll just say that our flight operations team continues to fly Orion and put it through its paces as the crew and the spacecraft make their way home. And the mission isn't over yet. We do continue to learn from how our spacecraft and our crew are operating together in space. We continue with several of the science activities that are focused on the crew health and life in space. So still a lot of things going on. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rick so he can share some of the operational details.
Thank you, Lori. The administrator touched on a few of the operations that the crew's been up to recently, but I'll fill in a few of the other details of interest. Since we last met Sunday evening, the crew performed the first orbital trajectory correction maneuver, outbound trajectory correction maneuver number 3. It was 10.4 feet per second. The burn duration was 19 seconds, and we used our auxiliary thrusters on the service module. Obviously, yesterday was the big day with flyby, and I'll save all those details for Kelsey, but you know, we had some really poignant remarks from the crew, and I can assure you there wasn't a dry eye in mission control when the naming of the 2 craters was announced by Jeremy. As part of the lunar flyby, the crew made their pass closest to the moon, flying at 3,138 miles per hour relative to the surface of the moon. And now they're on their way making their march back home to Earth. We bid a temporary goodbye to the moon earlier today at 1:23 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the milestone where we exited the lunar sphere of influence and we're back under the control of Earth's gravity. As for today's operations, we had a couple of public affairs events. The crew is going to have, each of them will have a conference with their family members. We'll have some routine medical checks. And then in the evening, we're going to perform the first return trajectory correction maneuver. It will be 1.3 feet per second. It'll last about 15 seconds, and we're going to use the service module reaction control system thrusters to do that burn. We expect that burn to occur about 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Finally, I'll conclude my remarks with acknowledging that the USS John P. Murtha has left port and has started steaming out to the midway point for the recovery of Integrity and her crew later on Friday. That's all for today's operations update, so I'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Thanks. Spirits are very high. We did what we set out to do. The lunar science team and the crew prepared extensively, as we talked about a couple days ago, for flyby, and I hope you all saw that yesterday during execution. We confirmed, as Lori mentioned, that we can, achieve science through orbital observations and through integrating science into flight operations. And as Rick just said, we left temporarily, and we're looking forward to integrating all these lessons learned in future missions. I can't conclude opening remarks without diving into science detail, so forgive me just a couple deep dives. Impact flashes, over a 30-minute observation period, and this was largely during that time of the eclipse, crew observed several impact flashes. We did have citizen scientists here on Earth also looking for flashes, and I know that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter team is hard at work trying to identify evidence of those impact flashes that the crew observed. I did did have a chance to have the post-flyby crew conference with the crew this morning, and we asked a lot of follow-ups on those impact flashes. Impact flashes are caused by micrometeorite impacts hitting the moon, and they really help tell us about the dynamic lunar environment, which is, of course, also important when we think about future missions. I don't know if I expected to have the crew see any on this mission, so you probably saw the surprise and shock on my face. And though I was not in the science evaluation room, I heard that there were audible screams of delight. So, a very excited science community. You've heard me talk a lot about the importance that human explorers bring to scientific exploration, especially around observations of color. And so I'm sure all of you, like I was eagerly awaiting if they saw any other colors other than black, white, and shades of gray. You heard that they did indeed. Right away, they started describing the green around Aristarchus Plateau and different brown hues. And these colors really help tell us nuances about the chemistry of lunar material, especially the greens around Aristarchus. That was exciting. That's something that we can all see from here on Earth. And so I encourage you all to go out and look at the moon tonight and look for Aristarchus and imagine those green hues that the crew members saw. You heard a lot of discussion, especially from our pilot, Victor Glover, about the Terminator, which really, to our mind, highlighted the benefits and also the challenges for future surface operations. The lighting conditions along the Terminator that the crew experienced yesterday do mimic, in many ways, the lighting conditions of the South Polar region. The low sun angles, the dramatic lighting causing, the extreme shadowing, and illumination also accentuating topography. This is really important for our agency's future moon-based plans and understanding how crew member observations can contribute to future mission planning. And finally, the Artemis II crew, in a very poignant moment, offered proposed names for two unnamed craters in the moon's eastern hemisphere: Crater Integrity for their vehicle and Crater Carol for Commander Wiseman's late wife. I think we have a picture. Yeah, thank you. Upon return, the crew does plan to submit these to the International Astronomical Union as consideration for official names. There was, as Rick said, not a dry eye in the house. Really poignant moment, and that we were really glad to observe them describing. And with that, I think we can take questions.
Yep, we will open the floor and take questions, and my colleague Will over here will pass along the mic. We can start with you, Jackie.
Thanks so much. Jackie Waddles with CNN. I don't think there was a dry eye on Earth when Carroll Crater was named. I was just curious, was Reid aware that that was going to be something that the crew was going to do? I was just curious if there was any pre-planned discussions and they were just kind of looking for the crater, or kind of how that came about. And then really quickly, I also wanted to just check on a toilet status update. We heard this morning that I thought I heard some chatter around it being considered, a reentry issue now. Like, is the toilet out of commission until they get back, or where does that stand? Thanks.
I'll take the second part.
Okay. Yes, I know the crew put, a lot of, obviously, thought and pre-planning into what you heard yesterday. It is my understanding that he was aware prior to yesterday.
And the toilet remains operational. The challenge that we're working through is evacuating the wastewater tank. The vent is a lot less than we were expecting, and so we're having to fall back to some other alternate means other than the toilet. But what you overheard on the space to ground, or on the Orion to Earth channel this morning, was us deferring some maintenance on the toilet. Typically, when you have 4 crew members using it throughout the day, nominally, you have to do a maintenance activity once a day. And with a lower use rate, since we're not able to vent the wastewater products, we don't need to do the maintenance as often. And so that's what that exchange was about.
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. I'm over here. Jared, that's a pretty impressive and full portfolio of missions you outlined that NASA's involved in now. And without getting you in trouble with your boss, are you going to be able to defend an $18.8 billion budget, $5.6 billion for 27, or are you prepared to kind of work with Congress to see if the administration will support more Thank you.
I will say we'd like to keep the focus on what we were speaking about today and then move on to other questions like that at a later date and keep the focus on the mission. Thank you.
Mark Strassman, CBS. I feel as though I talked to about 10 people off campus today, and they all wanted to ask me about those remarkable images. And so they asked me, so I'm going to ask you. Have you seen anything in those images that surprised you? And what about those images touched you?
Take that, Kelsey?
Sure. Oh my gosh. When I woke up this morning, I've spent most of my morning just flipping through, the thousands of images that have started to come down. And there is something in every image that surprises me, right? I mean, you might think that after looking at hundreds of images taken of the lunar surface, I would get sick of it. I have not, nor do I anticipate getting sick of it. It's just their experience and the amount of time and the rate at which they were moving. Every vantage point is different. You heard them audibly describe yesterday, wow, I'm looking at the same feature as I was 10 minutes ago and it looks different, right? And the images reflect that. And so, when I see these images, I connect to each one in a different way, especially in light of what we heard from the crew yesterday. I think as a geologist by training, I love looking at the pictures of the lunar surface, but, I think certainly, emotionally, a lot of us have connected with the images of Earth, with the images from during the eclipse, with the images from the vehicle cameras taking pictures of the moon during the eclipse period. And while they are inspirational and I think allow all of us to, really feel a little bit of what they were feeling, there's also a lot of science hidden, inside of those images. And I can tell you that right now, as we speak, there is a science evaluation room full of several dozen scientists who are already getting going on those images. Just as one example, there was a healthy scientific debate this morning about some of those images taken during the eclipse period and what we can see of the solar corona and what we can see of zodiacal light. So the conversations and the science lessons learned are just beginning.
Hi, TJ Mascaro with the Epoch Times. Thanks so much for taking the time. For Jared, as we saw with Artemis II going around the moon and having that very characteristic blackout of when they go around the moon. How much longer are missions to the moon going to have that as we develop a moon base? And where do, say, communication satellites in lunar orbit land on the priority list?
Yeah, I'd say, people have asked quite a bit about, was elevated blood pressure when we were without comms with Orion on the far side of the moon. We have comm issues in LEO relatively, routinely. Certainly our operators train for it, our astronauts do as well. But in terms of the bigger picture, can we do better? For sure, right? We've talked about, prioritizing observation and comm relay satellites for lunar operations so we can bring the world along with us as we build out a moon base. And I think I was in a meeting not that long ago where we described it as if not the platinum age for commercial communication capabilities, certainly the golden age. We're very close. So we have a number of providers that are all investing heavily in these kind of capabilities that we can take advantage of in LEO, cislunar space, and I have no doubt in lunar orbit in the years ahead.
Hi, Kay for Interstellar Gateway. Thanks for doing these. This is really cool. Jared, question for you. Can you speak on the responsibility of what being the administrator during such a pivotal moment means? And secondly, I'm speaking on behalf of musicians around the world and bands. I have a band called Chasing Satellites, and will there be potentially an opportunity to submit music for a future Artemis mission for the wake-up calls? That was really cool to be a part of and to watch as a musician.
Certainly. So I think I've described before that I thought that certainly felt a lot more pressure, being on the outside and responsible for a human spaceflight mission than being in the vehicle itself, especially a mission such as Artemis II, which kicks off so many other exciting ones to follow as, you know, we return to the moon and build that enduring presence to learn so that we can undertake even grander missions, as Dr. Glaze referenced, beyond the moon in the future. So I think it is a great responsibility, but you derive confidence from all the expertise that exists within NASA, the workforce, our commercial, our international partners that come together for a moment like this, all the testing that goes into it, and the fact that we have this playbook before and we're running it. Now, in terms of contributions for music and future wake-up music for subsequent missions, I hope we're running so many missions to and from the moon in the future that we're going to have to cast a very wide net for creative content. So.
For Administrator Isaacman, Tom Costello with NBC News. I'm just wondering, how are you feeling now? I realize we don't have the crew home yet, but you've had a very successful trip around the far side. How are you feeling about this setting the stage, testing out the vehicle for a lunar landing as soon as 2028?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say for this mission, we're certainly off to a good start. I mean, clean launch, and the vehicle has been doing well. You know, I've made commentary early on that I like that we're talking about, water access valves and cabin temperature and even plumbing issues, for that matter, for all the things that we could have been potentially talking about prior to the mission underway. But I'll breathe easier when we get through re-entry and everybody's under chutes and in the water. In terms of getting ready for the subsequent missions, it's kind of why I picked some of the words that I did at the beginning of this press event, is that a lot of people's rightful attention right now is on the crew of Artemis II, especially here at JSC and Mission Control, especially the recovery forces that are now making their way out to bring this crew back to their family. And for everybody else, we've got the other things to get done, including thinking about Artemis III. It's why I was very happy that the crawler is making its way out to 39B right now. We've got a timeline to get it back in the VAB, ideally in a week. That would cut down on the turnaround, I think, by 3 months compared to Artemis II. So we can undertake, again, world-changing missions like Artemis II right now and get ready for the next ones at the same time.
Hi, Josh Dinner, space.com. Has this mission revealed anything about life aboard Orion, crew workload, flights in deep space, or maybe something unexpected that will shape how NASA and Artemis crews approach preparing for future missions?
You want to take that, flight ops?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. You know, we've learned a tremendous amount as part of a lot of the flight test subjective activities we've been doing. You know, I think we have a couple of problems that we still need to work out, but Orion has shown itself to be a very capable capsule for beyond Earth orbit space travel. And I think the things like, as the administrator talked about, the things that we're going to have to improve upon for Artemis III are relatively small and incremental in nature, as opposed to wholesale redesigns of spacecraft subsystems. So overall, I'm extremely pleased with the performance of the spacecraft and how it's served as a campsite for our 4 crew members.
We'll go from Marcia to Eric and then do a couple on the phone bridge.
I'm Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Dr. Young. It's hard for me to know how quickly these pictures are coming down. How many would you estimate that have come down so far of the moon? And these luminous flashes on the surface, was that an actual meteor shower, do you think, or is it just your usual business of falling debris?
Yeah, so the team, the FOD team, is working really hard to bring down the images as fast as they can. Of course, we also have other vehicle data that needs to come down as well, but the team is working really hard to try to get those images down and of course, get them out to you guys as well. We, as of the time I left Console roughly an hour ago, there was just over 50 gigabytes of data from yesterday that had come down. Of course, that's not, every image does not exactly have the moon in it, but it is taken from within the lunar observation period. So we're working really hard to get those down, as well as the audio files that the crew were taking. That's a really rich scientific data set because it captures the nuance of what the crew were seeing. You know, we heard a few of those per hour in those science situational reports you were hearing yesterday, but there are multiple hours of recordings of, you know, meaty science observations, about 2/3 of which we've been able to get down so far, and our team has already been looking at that, you know, those couple hours of transcripts and audio files. As for the impact flashes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think they saw at least 4 and possibly up to 6 impact flashes. Again, I talked to them about that just this morning in the crew conference with them. I think, you know, you know, it's very early to tell, right? This happened less than 24 hours ago. Our teams are looking at it now, and spacecraft like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter will be really helpful to try to help us narrow in on that. But the lunar environment is a dynamic place, and we have a lot to learn about it. You know, LRO has returned a lot of information about the lunar environment, but observations like this are a critical part of our understanding, which will pay dividends for future surface exploration.
Eric.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. There's a question maybe for Jared. So why haven't we been back to the moon in 53 minutes? I'm just kidding. So you brought up the Artemis II mission design. Can you bring up sort of, or talk about the 2 or 3 hardest problems that you're tackling? Sort of, you talked about the mission design meeting today, but sort of the 2 or 3 hardest problems you're tackling right now to make sure that launches next year.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far out in front of a mission that's underway right now. I would just say that there are a lot of things based on the information we have available today, from feedback from our vendors, that we know are achievable. And I think one of the questions probably will just be what the initial orbit will be for Artemis III. Is it going to be LEO or HEO? And I think that we're all going to have some sense of which one, and there's pros and cons for each of them for sure. We're all going to be able to have some sense about which path we'll likely go down based on launch cadence of our 2 HLS providers, both of which have launches coming up, I would say, in the next month or less right now. So a big key to our strategy, not just to return to the moon, but to stay and to build a base, is going to be rapid reusability of heavy lift launch vehicles. So the more they get experience doing that, the more options that are available for us for Artemis III. But I'd say right now, we certainly have a good plan for that mission. Will help us buy down a lot of risk in advance of a landing for Artemis IV in 28.
Jeff Faust with Space News.
Jeff Faust with Space News. Question for Dr. Young. Now that you are going to get all of these images and verbal descriptions and annotations, what's the plan for the science team in the days and weeks ahead to go through all of that data and see how they address the 10 science objectives that you laid out for this mission? Thank you.
Oh my goodness, what a good question. We have a lot of data to get through. Like I said, it has already started. We had teams working overnight, you know, after the crew went to sleep, as soon as we started getting data down. You know, I will reiterate that we will be getting all mission data relevant to lunar science archived and made publicly available within 6 months post splashdown. So these are all of the images of the moon, these audio files, and even the annotations. But in the meantime, over those next 6 months, we're also going to be preparing 2 reports that we also owe to be publicly released within 6 months post-mission. One is a science operations report that describes, you know, how our team was structured to integrate with flight operations to accomplish our objectives. But relevant to your question, the second one is a post-mission preliminary lunar science report. And so we are going to be going objective by objective with those 10 lunar science objectives you referenced, looking across this entire, you know, really rich, robust, but very large data set, and really trying to understand what data we got relevant to each objective, but set up the community for success so that they can access those data and help us answer these fundamental driving science questions. You know, the lunar science team for this mission, it was our charter to develop the objectives and to maximize the science value out of this mission. We'll be doing an initial assessment over 6 months, and then we're really eager to see what the community is able to do with these data.
We'll move to Ken Chang with the New York Times.
Thank you. So I have some questions about the optical communications. How was the performance like? How many gigabytes was sent? What was the data rate? How does that compare with what was expected? And how does it compare with the usual way of sending data back? And it seems like it's been almost operational already and not just a test. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question was relative to some of the data rates for the optical communication system. I'll just give you a stat from overnight that we heard from Consul. We got 20 gigabytes down in a little more than 45 minutes. That's orders of magnitude more than we get via our S-band telemetry system. So optical comm has been working really well, and hopefully we can take what we learned on Artemis II and expand its operational capability and its implementation for future missions.
And now we will move to Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
To me yesterday was just the vivid descriptions that the crew used for what they were seeing and how they remained in kind of constant contact and talkative throughout the flyby. I'm wondering if it's possible to say how that might have compared to the Apollo crew observations and how that robustness impacted the science and the data that was collected.
Absolutely. I mean, probably a lot of people watching have spent a lot of time looking back at Apollo and maybe watching Apollo in real time online and reliving what the Apollo crews, not just on the surface, but in orbit experienced. You have, I'm sure, heard the Apollo descriptions of the lunar surface from orbit, and they were also really impactful. They trained heavily in geology and orbital observations, just like the Artemis II crew did. I will say, listening to the level of scientific discourse that the crew was having yesterday was incredibly inspiring. I mean, a testament to how much they prepared before this mission. You know, I heard a couple times Christina and Victor especially saying, when we took the time to actually talk to each other about a specific target that we were both seeing, we elevated each other. We elevated what we were able to pull out of that target. You know, more brains on a scientific target are better than one, and we heard from them directly multiple times that they were helping each other to advance their scientific understanding of what they were looking at. We actually also heard them say, hey, we have a hypothesis. Can you guys provide guidance on that hypothesis, like right now in the middle of our flyby? So the science team was saying, you know, was cross-checking what they were seeing, was reading up geologic ages of major lunar impact features, and it was informing the observations they were making during the flyby. I mean, this is absolutely everything we hoped for by integrating science into flight operations, you know, because, again, science enables exploration and exploration enables science. And the fact that, you know, they're giving observations and, you know, I was able to immediately follow up on those observations with, you know, just the quick questions that can enhance science return, it meant that they were evaluating and buying down multiple working hypotheses in real time during their flyby. And just imagining the future when we have crew on the surface for short duration missions and ultimately the moon base, the amount of science we are able to gain when, you know, science is woven into this operational fabric is incredibly impactful. And we saw that, you know, for 7 straight hours yesterday.
Now we'll move to Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good afternoon. For Rick, what is the approximate time on Friday when the crew module separates from the service module, if you have that on hand? You know, the administrator mentioned splashdown is expected for around 8:07 Eastern. And then any color on kind of reentry prep work ahead for the crew and mission control between now and Friday. Thanks.
Sure, I'll start with some of the times. The crew module and service module separation is going to occur about 20 minutes before entry interface. So that separation will be at 7:33 p.m. Eastern time. We expect entry interface about 7:53 p.m. Eastern time. with a splashdown around 8:06 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. As for the preparations that the ground and the astronauts are doing today to prepare for entry, or today and future days, a lot of it is all of the science equipment and cameras and tablets and reference material that got unstowed in support of the flyby. Well, we have to put that all away. We have to pack up our suitcases and get ready to come home. And that takes time, and so we are laying out a plan to make sure that the crew gets everything packed away in time to get their suits on and get in their seats to perform that final trajectory correction maneuver on splashdown day and come home.
We'll move back in the room to Joey and then on to Will.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just had another quick toilet question. Do you have any idea as to why the venting is not happening as fast as you hope it is, and what other hardware on the spacecraft might that implicate, or what other problems might that cause?
Yeah, so the engineering team is going to go through a full fault tree to identify all of the potential causes of the blockage. Initially, you may have recalled that we thought it might be icing up at the nozzle at the outer mold line of the spacecraft. We have pretty high confidence that it's not an icing condition. We've put the spacecraft in a sun-focused attitude to bake off any ice. We've activated heaters along the lines internal to the spacecraft, and we still see a blockage. And so the latest theory is related to some of the chemistry that goes into ensuring that the wastewater doesn't develop any biofilms. And there may be something going on with a chemical reaction where there's some debris that's generated as part of that reaction, and it's getting clogged in a filter. But again, we don't have root cause, and once we get the spacecraft back into the processing facility in Florida, we'll be able to get access to all the components and do a real detailed fault tree to identify the root cause.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Going back to Dr. Young's point about the intersection of science and exploration, to both Dr. Young and to Dr. Glaze, given the number of believed to be impact flashes that the crew observed during just a relatively brief amount of time, I wonder how these observations and the ones made previously by LRO will factor into creating the conditions for a moon base that can allow the astronauts to stay safe, given the probability that they may experience a micrometeoroid impact at that site. Thank you.
Want to say anything? Well, I do think that the data that we're collecting with these observations, and as you noted, the LRO data that we're continuously collecting, we have been for quite a while, all of that is being fed into our plans and making sure that we understand what all of the variety of risks are. There's many that we're looking at, and of course micrometeorites being one, as we start to establish infrastructure on the surface and understanding those rates. These kind of data really help inform us as far as what we can anticipate. And of course, the different parts of the moon, down at the South Pole, maybe a little slightly different rates than we would see higher up at higher latitudes. So we need to compile all of those data and understand where, what those impacts might be.
Hi, I'm Nick Natari with ABC 13. A question about the scientific stuff that you found yesterday. I know the question was asked about what was inspirational. I talked to Joel Kearns yesterday, and he had told me, I'm just looking at his quote, as a scientist, I can tell you what's most inspirational is when you're pouring through something you're working on and you realize you're seeing something that nobody else has ever seen before. I know you talked about the impact flashes, but is there anything else that no one else has seen before that you guys have already saw? And then also explain to us on Earth that maybe this is high level over our heads, how what was photographed or taken yesterday could maybe give us some answers on our planet of Earth.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely questions. I might just give a specific example of something I heard from the crew yesterday. My background's in geology and specifically impact cratering, so every time they describe those beautiful basins, I get really excited. They did describe Ohm crater a couple of different times, and they noticed a variety of different color and albedo hues associated not just with Ohm, but with the rays that extend out from the crater. This could indicate, impact impact events are really compelling for a lot of reasons. Obviously, I'm quite biased, having written my PhD on them. But they can excavate material from great depths below the surface, which means they're kind of like a geologist cheat code, right? Where you can't get all the way down there by yourself, but when an impact has brought up that material for you, it can actually perform that excavation, and we just need to send the crew to the right spots on the surface, and they can actually look at depths far below the surface. And I bring that up here to say that what the crew observed around Ohm yesterday was they actually noticed color and albedo hues coming out in those rays, and they noticed that they were distinct and different and evolved along the ray systems, which could potentially lead us to believe that that crater excavated from distinct depths below the surface of the moon. So it's those kinds of nuanced observations that can ultimately inform future landed missions, future crewed missions, to understand where can we go to maximize the scientific value. These ultimately get at chronology of the solar system, at how the inner solar system has evolved over time, which connects to, you know, the moon being the witness plate for our planet and for the inner solar system. You know, you heard Lori and I the other day get very excited about talking about, you know, pesky plate tectonics and oceans and vegetation that gets in the way of us looking at the early part of our planet's past, and the fact that that part of the record of our Earth-Moon system is still available on Earth. Well, where it's available is the highlands, the far side highlands, and the South Pole. Specifically, the South Pole has the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is my personal favorite lunar and planetary science objective. It's the oldest basin in the solar system. If we can get the right age constraints on that basin, it can help us anchor the chronology for the entire solar system. And so crew observing things like they did with Ohm, where they can say, with my eyes, I can see this distinction, which can ultimately tell us that future observations of high priority landing sites could tell us something similar. This is how we start to really bite away at these really, really fundamental science questions that impact not just our understanding of the moon, but how our own planet has evolved over time.
Mark Kirkman with NSF. This is for Rick. While we have you here, I'd like to drill down a little bit on entry day a little more. Sounds like weather in the primary recovery zone is looking favorable, but can you walk through, as we approach EEI and pass EEI, what redes capability you have, what kind of cross range and downrange capability you have, when are you committed to that landing zone? And also, with this thermally benign entry you're going to fly, do you still expect to exceed Apollo 10's speed record? I know you don't care about that stuff, but we do.
That's all right. You can still keep asking the questions, and we'll go follow up, and we'll find the answers. I do not have the answer offhand about the Apollo 10 speed record, so we'll have to get that back to you tomorrow. And tomorrow, I'm actually going to provide a lot of detail about the sequence of events for entry, as I'm the entry flight director for Friday evening splashdown. But with respect to your particular question about entry interface, we can select a new landing site as late as entry interface. We would prefer to not do that. We like to give ourselves a little bit of margin, but we can adjust the latitude and longitude of the site, and the spacecraft will fly to those coordinates so long as we get that command up before entry interface. So we're going to make a decision far in advance of entry interface to know where the splashdown site will be, because our top priority is to ensure that when Integrity and her crew of 4 splash down, that we have the recovery forces right nearby to help get them out and get them back to the recovery ship. So we have about a 475 nautical mile range. I can't do that conversion. But 475 miles of ocean within which we can select the most acceptable weather. And as you said, weather near San Diego looks favorable, so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to land close to the shore.
Tom Clark with Sky News in the UK. First of all, congratulations on the flyby and those breathtaking images, and thanks for doing this too. There's been a lot of focus on the toilet, but I'm looking to get a kind of overall perspective on how happy you've been with Orion and the European Service Module. What are you definitely going to have to fix before you fly it again? And how confident are you looking ahead to re-entry?
I'm not sure I heard the end of the question. you talked about the how the Orion is performing, and it's performing spectacularly. I have to tell you, our Orion team is so pleased with really everything the way that it's performing. The engines, the manual control that you've heard us talk about several times, that the crew have just gone over and over about how well that's performing, how nicely the Orion crew module is handling. The service module, again, providing everything that we need. Yeah, we've had a couple of challenges, but overall, I mean, I think they're pretty minor in the whole grand scheme of things. The hardware itself performing extremely well. We're really looking forward to turning this around and flying again in a year, and then again a year after that. I think this hardware is really spectacular, and we're really looking forward to doing this more often. We're going to get the toilet figured out. The toilet is actually functioning perfectly. It's the drain, the ability to vent the wastewater. And as Rick said earlier, as soon as we get this down on the ground, we'll be able to get inside, and we will get to the root of that.
Hi, Lisa Grossman from Science News. This is especially for Kelsey, but actually for all of you. The astronauts yesterday used a lot of really fun analogies and descriptors for the features on the moon they were seeing. Did any stand out for you as favorites?
Oh, of like the analogies they used to describe lunar features? Yes, I liked the handprint, and that actually, we had a team working overnight to figure out exactly what they meant. They found it this morning. They were very excited to figure out exactly what they were talking about. I think, we train them, to be totally blunt, we train them to describe it like they see it. Tell us what speaks to you and how you can communicate it back to us. And so I think Christina delivered on that ask when she described a feature as looking like a wound. We do agree. I'm not sure it was my favorite lunar descriptor I heard yesterday, but it was evocative, and she was right. It did indeed look like a wound. And I was also really resonating with the way that several of the crew members were trying to, in the spirit of wanting to have a scientific dialogue, right? They had science questions they were trying to answer, and they were asking us some pretty sophisticated questions real time. And so to bring us with them on what they were seeing, the way that they were cluing us in to how they were moving across the moon by saying, take this feature, draw a line from that to this, and then continue going, and this is the feature we're looking at. Help us use that as a waypoint. It was an incredibly impactful way to have our team be ready to very quickly provide them with answers to the science questions, which is, again, important, not just because, of course, we want to support our crew at the moon, but when we can respond quickly and understand what they're looking at, it maximizes science, because we can immediately ask the follow-up question and have them burrow in even deeper on those multiple working hypotheses. So the descriptions are not just great to clue us into what they're seeing, but it really helps us in real time maximize the science we're getting out of, in this case, a 7-hour flyby.
I'd like to just comment real quickly on one of my favorite. It wasn't actually a lunar observation, but it was during the eclipse, and they were looking at the planets that could be seen. You could see Mercury, Mars, and Saturn.
And Venus, yeah.
And Venus on the other side, yeah. But they were looking at the planets, and I can't remember who said it, said one of them looks kind of red, and Kelsey's observation was, that's Mars, you're looking at your future. And I thought that was spectacular.
Thanks. We only have time for a couple more questions, so I'll pass it over to you, Jonathan, and then we'll do one more.
Thank you. Jonathan Seri with Fox News. I would love to know about the logistics that went into the ship-to-ship call. If you could explain in layman's terms, how did it work out? And perhaps more importantly, what was the symbolic impact of that call?
So the logistics, we have done a number of public affairs events on integrity throughout the mission. We do them multiple times a week on the space station, and everything goes through Houston. So the data comes through the Deep Space Network, through the Jet Propulsion Laboratory over to Houston. We have audio and video technicians here in Mission Control who can reconfigure the routes for the data and send it to the appropriate destination. We do public affairs events down from the ISS through the tracking and data relay satellite system. And so that's something we do all the time. It's just a matter of connecting the two wires. And so logistics were really quite easy despite the distances.
Yeah, maybe I could add too, I was in the flight control room this morning for that call, and something I observed that I didn't anticipate, you know, of course we're expecting the crew joy at talking and connecting to each other, but looking around the room at the other flight controllers, and actually the viewing gallery was open for other FOD employees to observe. You know, this is a team sport, you know, so many people, thousands of people work to enable this, and seeing the joy on everybody's faces as these two missions flying at the same time had this moment of connection is going to stay with me as a moment of inspiration from this mission.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, in terms of it being symbolic, it is certainly a step in the right direction. I mean, it began with a single person in a Mercury spacecraft, and we progressed to 2 spacecraft at one time. I mean, now we've got an international space station while a spacecraft is coming back from the moon. This is progress. We talk a lot about, you know, what is an interesting KPI, the number of people living and working in space. We want to see that number grow. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we've got communication going on between our moon base, you know, their colleagues that are orbiting above them in a lander, relaying back maybe to other colleagues on an international or future commercial space station. These are all steps in the right direction for the exciting future that many of us were probably imagined as children and we're trying to bring into reality.
We're going to do last question.
Hi, Dr. Allison McGraw, Mysterious Meteorites from here in Houston, Texas, for lunar science lead Kelsey Young. Are there going to be any science data available of perhaps the color data for the impact flashes or trajectory directions they came from?
I asked the crew about that this morning. Any color? How long did they last? Where were they? And Reid and Jeremy, as I was talking to them, had their crew tablets out and they were making annotations and sketches on what they saw. You know, they did just report this morning in our conversation that they didn't observe any color to them and that they were very, very brief, but they did provide sketches on whereabout they saw them. And so again, like I said, we're going to use the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to try to, you know, track to those features and try to identify what they saw. Trajectory is going to be hard, but Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data can help us pull that out. What we really wanted to do before the crew, you know, splashed down and got distracted with all of the things they're going to be doing here was capture that nuance before, you know, it got overcome by a lot of other mission events. So we were able to capture a lot more detail this morning in my conversation with them, and the LRO team is off to the races.
Great. With that, thank you for joining us today for our mission status briefing. We will have another briefing tomorrow. Until then, you can continue to follow along with the mission 24/7 on NASA's YouTube channel, and we will leave you with these beautiful images captured by Integrity.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Artemis Mission Control Room here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where teams continue monitoring all systems and the crew aboard the Orion spacecraft, the first flight of humans on this spacecraft.